On Valentine's Eve, the hostess smiled politely and said, "I'm sorry, we don't have a table for one tonight." She didn't know the woman standing there owned half the city. She only saw someone alone, and the silence that followed hurt more than the rejection. Before we go on, take a moment. If this story already feels uncomfortably real, tap like. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if you value quiet, human stories like this one, subscribe and stay with us. Now, back to that night. Valentine's Eve always arrived quietly for Claire Holloway. No red roses waiting at her door, no reservations made weeks in advance, just another date circled on the calendar that reminded her how visible success could make a person and how invisible it could leave them at the same time. She stood just inside the entrance of Etoile, the kind of restaurant where candles were lit before sunset and coats were taken with deliberate care. Couples moved past her, laughter low and intimate, hands brushing as if by instinct. The air smelled like wine and citrus. Claire adjusted the cuff of her tailored coat and met the hostess's eyes again. "For Holloway," she said, calmly, "7:30. The hostess checked the screen, frowned slightly, then offered an apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry, we're fully booked tonight, especially for Valentine's." Claire nodded once. "I understand." There was no argument, no flash of anger. She thanked the hostess and stepped aside, letting a couple squeeze past her. The woman glanced at Claire with a flicker of sympathy. The man didn't look at her at all. Outside, the cold pressed in immediately. February wind cut through the street, sharp and unromantic. Claire stood under the awning for a moment, watching the door swing open and closed. She could have made a call. One call would have fixed everything. The manager would have appeared, apologies would have followed, a table would have been created. She didn't make the call. She walked instead. Her heels echoed against the sidewalk as she headed toward the quieter end of the block. Storefronts glowed pink and red. Every display seemed designed to remind people that love was meant to be shared. Claire kept her gaze forward. She had learned long ago how to move through public spaces without inviting attention. She reached the corner and stopped, unsure where she was going. Home, probably. A glass of wine, a report she hadn't finished reading, a city skyline that no longer impressed her. "Excuse me." The voice was male, careful, not demanding. Claire turned. A man stood a few feet away, holding a paper bag with a heart printed on the side. He wore a dark jacket that had seen better winters. His hair was slightly unkempt, the way it got when someone had stopped worrying about small things. At his side was a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, clutching a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. "I hope this isn't strange, but were you just turned away at Etoile?" Claire hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." He glanced back at the restaurant, then down at the child. "We've got a reservation for 4. It was supposed to be my sister and her boyfriend, but they bailed last minute. Happens." He shrugged, not bitter, just factual. "If you want, you could join us. I hate seeing a table go to waste." Claire looked at him, really looked. There was no recognition in his face, no calculation, just an offer that felt almost awkward in its sincerity. "That's kind of you," she said, "but I don't want to intrude." "You wouldn't, honestly. It'd be nice. My daughter's already decided this is the worst Valentine's of her life." The girl nodded solemnly. "He burned the cookies." "They were slightly overdone," he corrected. I surprised myself by smiling. "All right," I said, "if you're sure." Inside, the hostess didn't question the change. Chairs were adjusted, menus placed. Claire found herself seated across from the little girl, who introduced herself as Lily and immediately began explaining the superior qualities of strawberry ice cream over chocolate. The man's name was Evan. He was a single father, widowed, he explained quietly, not as a confession, just a fact. He worked maintenance for the city schools. Nights like this usually spent at home, but Lily's teacher had talked up Valentine's Day so much that he'd wanted to do something special. Claire listened more than she spoke.
Evan talked in short, thoughtful sentences, careful with his words. He cut Lily's food without being asked. He noticed when her attention drifted. Claire felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not desire, not envy, something gentler. When the check came, Evan reached for it automatically. "I can help," Claire said. He shook his head. "No, you're our guest." She didn't argue. Outside, Lily hugged Claire without warning, then ran ahead, swinging the paper bag happily. Evan smiled, embarrassed. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for asking." They parted without exchanging numbers. It felt complete as it was. Claire walked home slowly, the city quieter now. She didn't know yet that this small kindness would circle back into her life, that the man who shared his table would soon be the only person who treated her like a human being when the world decided she was something else entirely. She also didn't know that Evan, watching his daughter fall asleep on the couch later that night, would keep thinking about the woman who said thank you like it mattered, and how helping her felt unexpectedly right.
Claire followed the man inside without deciding to. The restaurant door closed behind them, sealing out the cold and the soft noise of the street. The warmth hit her first, then the sound. Cutlery, low laughter, a piano somewhere in the back trying not to be heard. The host looked up, surprised, then confused. The man spoke before anyone could stop him. "Table for 4, he said, steady. "Reservations under Brooks." The host hesitated, glanced at the screen, then nodded. "Right this way." Claire noticed how easily it happened. No apology, no explanation, just confidence delivered quietly, like it belonged there. They were seated near a window. The city lights blurred behind the glass, red and gold and moving. The little girl climbed into the chair across from Claire, still clutching the stuffed rabbit. One ear hung loose, stitched badly at the seam. The man pulled out a chair for Claire without looking at her, as if it was simply the next right thing to do. She sat. Her coat stayed on. She hadn't planned to stay long. She didn't plan much anymore. "I'm Evan," he said, once menus were placed. "This is Lucy." The girl nodded solemnly. "Hi." Claire returned the nod. "Claire." She didn't offer a last name. She hadn't done that in years unless she had to. Evan didn't ask. That felt intentional. He didn't ask what she did. He didn't ask why she'd been turned away. He didn't ask anything that would make the moment feel transactional. He simply waited. Lucy studied Claire with open curiosity, not the kind that searched for flaws, just noticing. "You look sad," she said, matter of fact. Evan winced. "Lucy." Claire surprised herself by smiling. "That's okay," she said. "I think I might be." Lucy considered that. "My mom was sad a lot before she left," she said, then went back to her menu like she'd commented on the weather. Evan's jaw tightened. He didn't correct her. He didn't explain. Claire felt something shift. The honesty of children always landed heavier than it should. They ordered simply, pasta, soup, water, no wine. Claire noticed Evan's hands when he spoke to the server. Rough, clean, a faint scar across one knuckle. He held himself like someone used to waiting for things to go wrong. When the server walked away, silence settled, not awkward, just present. Claire realized she hadn't shared a quiet table with anyone in a long time. Silence usually meant boardrooms, power, negotiation. This felt different. It felt unclaimed. "So," Evan said finally, "they shouldn't have turned you away." Claire looked at him. He wasn't angry, just certain. "It happens," she said, "especially tonight." Evan shook his head once. "No, it shouldn't." He didn't elaborate. Lucy kicked her feet gently under the table. Claire wondered when she'd last been defended without being owed something in return. The answer didn't come. The food arrived. Steam curled up between them. Lucy ate carefully, methodical. Evan watched her more than his plate. Claire noticed the way his attention never left her for long. Not controlling, protective.
He listened when Lucy spoke, even when it was rambling. Claire found herself listening too. About school, about a spelling test, about the rabbit. It was absurdly grounding. Halfway through the meal, a woman at the next table leaned over. She smiled thinly at Evan, then looked at Claire. "Excuse me, is this your family?" The question carried weight, assumption. Evan answered before Claire could. "Yes," he said. The woman's smile faltered. "Oh, I didn't realize." She looked embarrassed, then curious. "You look familiar," to Claire. Claire met her gaze calmly. "I get that sometimes." The woman nodded, not satisfied, and turned back to her table. Evan didn't look at Claire. He focused on Lucy, who had stopped eating. "You okay?" he asked. Lucy nodded. The moment passed. The damage didn't. Claire felt the familiar heat under her skin. Not anger, exposure. She'd built her life around being unseen in rooms like this, unless she chose otherwise. Tonight, she hadn't chosen. Evan had, and somehow he'd protected her without knowing what he was protecting her from. Or maybe he had known, in his own way. Maybe he recognized loneliness when he saw it. After dessert, which Lucy insisted on sharing, Evan checked his phone. His face shifted. "I should get her home. School tomorrow." Claire nodded. Relief and disappointment tangled. Evan stood, helped Lucy with her coat, then turned to Claire. "Listen," he said, awkward now. "You didn't have to stay, but I'm glad you did." Claire stood too. She felt the urge to say something meaningful. Instead, she said, "Thank you." It felt insufficient. It was all she had. At the door, Lucy hugged Claire without warning, brief, fierce. Then she stepped back. "You don't look sad anymore." Claire swallowed. "Maybe a little less." Evan smiled at that. Just once. It changed his whole face. Outside, the cold returned. Evan paused. "We come here sometimes, not usually on nights like this." Claire nodded. "Neither do I." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and handed her a small card. A drawing, crayon, a stick figure holding another stick figure's hand. Lucy tugged his sleeve. "I made it for her," she whispered. Evan nodded. "For you," he said. Claire took it carefully, like it might break. "Thank you," she said again. This time, it landed. They walked away together, then parted at the corner. Claire watched them go. Evan's hand rested lightly on Lucy's shoulder, not guiding, just there. Claire stood alone again, the city loud around her, but something had shifted. The rejection still stung, but it no longer defined the night. She looked down at the drawing. For the first time in years, Claire Holloway felt seen for who she was, not what she owned, and it unsettled her more than any boardroom ever had.
Claire didn't go home right away. She walked instead, heels clicking against the pavement, the city moving around her like it always did. Couples passed her, holding hands, laughing too loudly, already half drunk on expectation. Store windows glowed with hearts and red ribbons. Every reflection showed her alone. She was used to that. What unsettled her was the paper card in her hand. The crayon lines had smudged slightly from the cold. 2 stick figures, uneven, honest. She slipped it into her coat pocket like it was something private. At home, the penthouse lights came on automatically. The place smelled faintly of lemon and something expensive she never noticed anymore. She kicked off her shoes, set her coat down, and stood in the middle of the living room without moving. The silence here was engineered. Thick glass, soundproofing, no neighbors, no interruptions. It had once felt like control. Tonight, it felt hollow. She poured a glass of water, left it untouched. Her phone buzzed. A message from her assistant, sent an hour earlier. "Everything okay? The board is asking about tomorrow's press dinner." Claire stared at the screen. Tomorrow. Another room full of people who wanted something from her. Another table she wouldn't have trouble getting. She typed back, "Cancel it." Then, after a pause, added, "Reschedule." No explanation. She set the phone down before she could overthink it. She didn't sleep much.
When she did, she dreamed of standing outside a restaurant, watching people through glass she couldn't break. The next morning came quietly. Claire dressed without thinking. Black coat, flat shoes, hair pulled back. She looked like herself again, the version that moved through the world without friction. She left early, drove herself, ignored the driver waiting downstairs. The office tower rose ahead of her, steel and certainty. Inside, everything bent around her presence. Doors opened, conversations paused, people smiled carefully. In the elevator, a junior analyst fumbled his badge. "Sorry," he said, flushed. Claire nodded once. "Take your time." The doors closed. He exhaled. She caught her reflection in the mirrored wall, controlled, distant, untouched. It worked. It always did. Until it didn't. Mid-morning, she found herself searching for a name she hadn't asked for. Evan Brooks. She hadn't even been sure that was his last name. It could have been anything. She didn't know where he worked. She didn't know why he'd helped her. Only she knew he hadn't asked who she was. That felt intentional and rare. At noon, she took lunch alone in the conference room overlooking the river. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it. Almost. She answered on the second ring. "Hello?" There was a pause. Then, "Hi, this is Evan." Her chest tightened before she could stop it. "I hope this isn't strange," he continued. "Lucy insisted I call. She wanted to make sure you got home okay." Claire closed her eyes briefly. "I did," she said. "Thank you." Another pause. "She also wanted to know if you still have the drawing." Claire smiled beside herself. "I do." Evan laughed quietly. "Good. She'd be upset if it got lost." They didn't talk long. No small talk. No expectations. Just a few careful sentences exchanged like something fragile. Before hanging up, Evan said, "Listen, I don't know what your life looks like, but if you ever want company that doesn't ask questions, we usually walk the pier on Sundays." Claire didn't answer right away. She could hear Lucy in the background, humming to herself. "Okay," Claire said finally, "maybe." When the call ended, she sat very still. The week moved forward relentlessly. Meetings, deadlines, a press release about a merger she barely remembered approving. Every night she found herself pulling the drawing out of her pocket, flattening the creases. On Sunday morning, she stood by her window watching the fog lift off the water. She told herself she was just going for a walk. She didn't dress up, she didn't bring security. The pier was busy but not crowded. Families, joggers, dogs straining at leashes. Claire walked slowly, scanning faces without meaning to. Then she saw them. Evan sat on a bench, Lucy beside him, her feet swinging. The rabbit rested on her lap. Evan looked up and saw Claire at the same moment. He stood, didn't wave, just waited. Claire approached. Lucy slid off the bench and hugged her again, less fiercely this time. "You came," Lucy said. "I said maybe," Claire replied. "That counts," Lucy decided. They walked together without a plan. Evan talked about ordinary things, work at the marina, fixing engines, the quiet satisfaction of things that either worked or didn't. Claire listened. She talked less. When she did speak, it was carefully, about growing up alone, about learning early not to need much. Evan didn't interrupt. He didn't try to relate. He just listened. That was new. Halfway down the pier, a man called out from behind them. "Hey, isn't that Claire Holloway?" Claire stopped. Evan turned. The man was already pulling out his phone. "My wife loves your company. Can I get a photo?" Claire felt the old instinct arise. Smile. Perform. Evan stepped slightly in front of her. Not blocking, just present. "She's busy," he said, calm. The man scoffed. "Relax, it's just a picture." Evan didn't move. Not today. The man hesitated, then shrugged and walked away. Claire's heart pounded. Evan turned back to her. "You okay?" She nodded. The gratitude sat heavy in her chest. Later, as the sun dipped lower, Lucy grew tired. Evan checked his watch. "We should head back." Claire nodded. She felt the familiar pull of endings. At the parking lot, they lingered. Lucy hugged her again. "You can come again," she said. "I know." Evan hesitated. "We're having dinner Friday," he said. "Nothing special. You're welcome if you want." Claire met his eyes. She saw the question there. Not about status, about risk. "Okay," she said. This time, she meant it. That night, Claire lay awake longer than usual. She thought about the restaurant, the rejection, the quiet kindness that followed. She understood now why it had shaken her. Power had never comforted her. It had only insulated her. Evan and Lucy hadn't needed anything from her. They had simply made room, and for the first time in a long while, Claire wondered what it might cost her to step into it.
Dinner at Evan's place was nothing like the rooms Claire usually entered. The building was old, brick darkened by years of salt air. The stairwell smelled faintly of detergent and something warm she couldn't place. Evan apologized for the stairs before she'd taken the first step. "Lucy hates the elevator," he said. "It stalls." Claire nodded and followed, hand light on the railing. The apartment door opened to sound. A radio low in the kitchen, a pot simmering. Lucy's shoes kicked off carelessly by the door. The space was small, lived in, and honest. No art chosen to impress, no furniture that looked afraid of being used. "You can sit wherever," Evan said, already moving toward the stove. Claire took off her coat and set it on the back of a chair. She noticed the table first, scarred wood, corners rounded from years of use. 2 placemats mismatched, a third added without ceremony. Lucy climbed into her chair and leaned over the table. "We're having soup," she announced, "and bread." Claire smiled. "Sounds perfect." Evan glanced at her, surprised, then relaxed. "Good," he said, "because that's all there is." They ate slowly. Lucy talked about school, about a classmate who lied, about how she wanted to learn to swim but didn't trust the water yet. Evan listened while stirring, nodding, asking questions that showed he was paying attention. Claire found herself watching them more than her plate, the rhythm between them, easy, earned. There was grief there, she could feel it, but it wasn't the kind that dominated every breath. It had been folded into the day-to-day, carried without ceremony. Halfway through dinner, a knock sounded at the door. Evan stiffened, just slightly. He wiped his hands and went to open it. A woman stood in the hallway, well-dressed, familiar. Lucy froze. "Mom?" she said, unsure. The woman's eyes flicked to Claire, then back to Lucy. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. "I was in the neighborhood." Evan didn't invite her in. "You said you'd call," he said quietly. The woman shrugged. "I forgot." Her gaze returned to Claire. "I didn't realize you had company." Claire stood, instinct. "I should go," she said. Evan shook his head once. "No." He looked at the woman. "This isn't a good time." The woman's mouth tightened. "I just wanted to see Lucy." Lucy slid off her chair and stood beside Evan. He rested a hand on her shoulder. "You can call tomorrow," he said, like we agreed. The woman laughed, sharp. "You're still doing this," she said, "acting like you get to decide." Evan didn't raise his voice. "I do," he said. The hallway felt suddenly small. The woman's eyes narrowed. "You were always good at pretending you had control," she said. Lucy's hand tightened in Evan's shirt. Claire stepped forward before she could stop herself. "You're upsetting her," she said calmly. The woman turned, startled. "And you are?" Claire met her gaze. "A guest in his home." The woman scoffed. "Figures," she muttered, then turned back to Evan. "You'll hear from my lawyer." Evan nodded. "We've been through this." She left without another word. The door closed softly. Silence pressed in. Lucy's eyes were wide. Evan crouched. "You okay?" Lucy nodded, though she didn't look it. Evan pulled her into a hug. Claire felt something crack open in her chest, the quiet strength of it, the way he absorbed the impact without letting it spread. Later, after Lucy was tucked into bed, Evan sat across from Claire at the table. the soup pot still warm between them. "I'm sorry," he said. "You didn't sign up for that." Claire shook her head. Neither did she. Evan exhaled. "No." He rubbed his hands together. "She comes and goes when it suits her." Claire nodded. "I know the type." Evan looked up. "You do?" Claire considered lying. She didn't. "People who want access without responsibility," she said. Evan watched her carefully. "That sounds personal." Claire met his gaze. "It is." They talked then, slowly, about Lucy's mother, about absence that came in waves, about choices made too late to undo. Claire spoke of her own childhood, the years she spent learning not to expect anyone to stay. Evan didn't interrupt. He didn't rush to reassure her. He let the silence do its work. When she finished, he said, "You don't owe anyone proof that you're human." Claire laughed softly. "Most days I feel like that's all I owe." Evan shook his head. "Not here." The weeks that followed changed without announcement. Claire came to dinner again, then again. Sometimes Lucy was there, sometimes not. Evan never asked for anything, never hinted. He treated her presence like a fact, not a favor. At work, Claire found herself distracted, less interested in asserting dominance, more aware of the quiet damage she'd learned to ignore. She postponed deals, listened longer. People noticed. Some admired it, others grew impatient. The story broke on a Tuesday. A photo from Valentine's Eve circulated online. Claire outside the restaurant, captioned cruelly. Speculation bloomed, commentary sharpened. Her phone buzzed non-stop. The board called an emergency meeting. "We need to address this," one member said. "It's distracting." Claire listened, calm. When it was her turn, she said, "No." The room stilled. "I won't address it. I didn't do anything wrong." A pause. "Public perception matters," someone argued. Claire nodded. "So does dignity." That evening, she went to Evans. She didn't call first. He opened the door and took one look at her face. "What happened?" he asked. She handed him her phone. He read silently. Lucy peeked around the corner. "Are you in trouble?" she asked. Claire crouched. "No," she said. "I'm just tired." Lucy nodded, satisfied. Evan set the phone down. "You can stay." Not a question. Claire swallowed. "Thank you." He hesitated. "They'll come after you," he added. Claire nodded. "They always do." Evan looked at her. "Not here." That night, Claire slept on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like laundry soap and home. She woke before dawn, listening to the apartment breathe. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of being seen. She wasn't certain what it would cost her, but she knew what it was already giving her, and she wasn't ready to walk away.
The first thing Claire noticed in the morning was the quiet. Not the empty kind she was used to. This was different. It had weight, warmth, the sound of someone else already awake, moving carefully so they wouldn't disturb her. She sat up on the couch, blanket slipping to her lap. Light filtered in through the blinds. The smell of toast drifted from the kitchen. Evans stood at the counter, back turned, coffee mug in hand. Lucy sat at the table in pajamas, drawing something with intense focus. "You snore," Lucy said, without looking up. Claire blinked. "I do?" "Just a little," Lucy added, "not loud, like breathing that forgot it was supposed to be quiet." Claire laughed, surprised at the sound of it. Evan turned, smiling despite himself. "She notices everything," he said. "I like that," Claire replied. They ate breakfast together. Nothing fancy. Toast, eggs, conversation that moved easily around the sharp edges of the night before. Evan didn't ask about the board. Claire didn't volunteer details. They both understood that some things needed time to settle. After breakfast, Claire walked Lucy to school with Evan. The three of them moved down the sidewalk like it was already normal. At the school gate, Lucy stopped and looked between them. "Are you coming back tonight?" she asked Claire. Claire hesitated. Evan didn't speak. He didn't rescue her from the moment. Claire knelt, meeting Lucy's eyes. "If Evan says it's okay," she said carefully. Lucy grinned and looked at her father. Evan nodded. "It's okay." Lucy hugged Claire quickly, then ran inside without looking back. Claire stood there, chest tight. "She trusts easily," she said. Evan shook his head. "She doesn't. She just knows when something feels real." That afternoon, the pressure came fast. Emails, calls, advisors warning her about optics, about narratives, about how a powerful woman choosing something small, something ordinary, unsettled people. One message stood out, a reminder of the clause in her contract: personal conduct, public image. Claire stared at the screen for a long time. She thought about the restaurant door closing behind her on Valentine's Eve. She thought about Lucy's question. That evening, she went home, not to Evan's, to her penthouse. She stood alone in the quiet space and saw it clearly for the first time, the way everything was designed to impress no one in particular, the way loneliness had been mistaken for freedom. She drafted a statement, not an apology, not an explanation, just the truth. She acknowledged the photo, she acknowledged the speculation, and then she wrote one line that her advisors would hate: "I will not apologize for choosing connection over convenience." She sent it. The fallout was immediate. The stock dipped, the board split, meetings were called. But something else happened too. Messages poured in, quiet ones, from employees, from women, from people who had never seen themselves reflected in the version of success she represented until now. Claire went to Evans that night anyway. He was helping Lucy with homework when she arrived. He looked up, searching her face. "You okay?" he asked. Claire nodded. "I think so." Lucy held up her paper. "I got an A," she announced. "That's amazing," Claire said. Evan watched her for a long moment, then said, "Stay." She did. Weeks passed. The noise faded. Some partnerships dissolved, others deepened. Claire stepped back from day-to-day operations and surprised herself by not panicking. She started mentoring instead, listening, building quietly. Evan kept working, kept parenting, kept being exactly who he was. They didn't rush anything. They didn't label it. They learned each other in pieces, on walks, over dinners, in moments where nothing happened, and that was the point. One evening, Lucy asked a question that neither of them was ready for. "Are you lonely anymore?" she asked Claire. She considered it. Evan watched her. "No, I think I am," she said finally. Lucy nodded, satisfied. The next board meeting was her last. Claire didn't resign in anger. She didn't make a scene. She explained her vision, a slower one, a human one. When it became clear they didn't share it, she stood. "I built something," she said calmly. "Now I'm choosing to live in it." She walked out with her dignity intact. That night, she came home to Evan's apartment. Home. The word landed differently now. They sat on the couch after Lucy went to bed. The city hummed outside. "I don't know what comes next," Claire said. Evan took her hand. "Neither do I." She smiled. "That's okay." They didn't promise forever. They didn't need to. They chose the next day, and the one after that. Months later, on another holiday, they stood in a crowded place again. This time, no one turned her away. No one whispered, and even if they had, it wouldn't have mattered. Claire looked at Evan, at Lucy, at the small, imperfect life she had almost missed, and she understood something she hadn't before. Being chosen didn't mean being admired. It meant being known. Thank you for staying with this story until the end.